And I'm thinking, just to switch gears a little bit, that the judicial system, not the judicial system, but judicial attitudes change in the 1970s and 80s. And partly they change out of the work of the then rather young lawyer, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I'm wondering if you could talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's interesting actually that we're just getting to this, because I think a lot of the women's history that is out there now, when it looks at the ERA, it says it's through the judicial avenue that we get something equivalent to equal rights for women, not the legislative avenue. Ruth Bader Ginsburg is pivotal in the judicial story. She runs the ACLU's Women's Rights Project. She founds and runs the ACLU's Women's Rights Project in the 1970s, and her strategy is interesting. She decides that she's going to attack all of the laws that we talked about, the Economic Equity Act sort of looking at, as well as divorced women being somewhat trapped by the laws that treat women as inherently homemakers and men as breadwinners, especially in marriage, by arguing that men are being discriminated against because they don't have access to dependent benefits through their wives. And she does this in a series of cases, including Weinberger v. Weisenfeld, that take on pensions, they take on wills, they take on military benefits, and it's very successful. This is actually a winning strategy. So even before the limited success of the Economic Equity Act, there's a series of cases that do start to degender the social insurance system and the laws that govern it. What's interesting is they leave in place the breadwinner homemaker system. They can't rewrite the laws. They just say men and women can be either breadwinners or homemakers.
Right, as in the Weinberger versus Wiesenfeld case, where a male, a young father, loses his wife to illness and then death and applies for Social Security so he can stay home and take care of his children. She has been covered by Social Security. And the Social Security people say, oh no, we do this if a woman loses a husband, but we don't do this if a man loses a wife. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg takes the case to the Supreme Court, which says, no, you can't do this anymore. So that's fascinating. And you say that happens in military benefits too? Can you tell us about that?
Men in the military have access to many benefits for their families. It's part of the deal when you join the military. You're not only getting paid, but retirement pensions, often houses on army bases, and any health insurance, things like that. And it's all through specific laws directly for the military. When women start to enter the military, they try and claim those for their spouses. And initially, there's a lot of debate over whether or not men are eligible for those same benefits if their wives join the military.
I want to ask one last set of questions, which I think is crucially important here. And that is that, of course, one of the big issues of women entering the labor force has to do with pregnancy. And as in the union movement among organized women, many of the initial contracts for union women don't cover their pregnancies, much less maternity leave. They don't even cover delivery. And yet they do cover delivery and pregnancy for the wives of male workers. And this contradiction, if you like, in the ways in which pregnant women are treated come before the courts, so that the courts begin to think about how pregnancy affects the workplace and to begin to put a damper on employees' capacity to discriminate against women workers. And here I'm thinking of the passage of the Pregnancy Disability Act. Can you tell us how that came about?
Well, so it's interesting. I think actually what you see in both the Pregnancy Disability Act that you just mentioned as well as other laws, is a sort of iterative process where the cases come before the court makes a decision, and sometimes that just tosses the issue back to Congress. So in 1977, in G versus Gilbert, a case comes before the Supreme Court where the court is asked to rule on the question of, is pregnancy a disability based on sex? And they say that it is not. And therefore, employers can continue to discriminate on the basis of pregnancy. And as a result, the issue sort of moves back to Congress because, of course, Congress can pass a law that says, no, specifically pregnancy is a disability based on sex, and therefore employers cannot discriminate against it. And that is exactly what happens here. You see a similar sort of iterative process going on with the military benefits that came up earlier, where the court will say, well, unless Congress says that military benefits can be divided and divorced, they can't be, for example. And then Congress has to go back and say, yes, we do think benefits can be divided and divorced.
So it's a combination then of the courts, the legislature, and pressure that comes from working women themselves, mostly in and through their unions, that create this sense that by the end of the 70s, the society as a whole has to come to terms with the fact that wage work and family need somehow to be reconciled.
Exactly, but I think you also get a tremendous backlash from people who do not think society should have to.
Can you talk about the backlash?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that there's this, as you say, that society as a whole is reckoning with this, both legislatively and just through the daily lives of individuals and through pop culture, and that generates a tremendous backlash on the part of women who end up who are conservative women. It's led by Phyllis Schlafly, who's sort of the chief arch anti-feminist, but there are lots of them out there. And they become very influential as the 1970s progresses. They start to have big anti-feminist rallies to counter feminist activities. And then they can take a lot of credit for helping to elect Ronald Reagan in 1980. And so they gain a lot of political power after.